Horrific is the perfect balance between the frenzied, insane psychopath and the malevolent, meticulous serial killer that lurks within Cannibal Corpse. Welcome back and hello if you are new. So 35 years into their career, and on album number 16, you would be forgiven if you thought maybe Cannibal Corpse might slow it down. But instead, of course, they absolutely haven't. Their new album is just as violent, as frenzied, and as brutal as you would expect from these amazing, amazing death metal icons. So, without further ado, I'm going to be talking about Cannibal Corpse's brand new album, Chaos Horrific. Stays on guard as far as the eye can see, saturating the vision. So if you're not familiar with Cannibal Corpse, the band formed in 1988 and are, I would say, arguably responsible for some of the best death metal in the world. So I would say that Cannibal Corpse are also arguably responsible for popularizing death metal. You know, like the explicit nature of Vincent Locke's artworks, I think has definitely brought them a lot of controversy over the years. Their themes very much reflect the idea of horror, and they kind of really created the blueprint for what I think modern day death metal very much kind of has to answer for. Musically, they're characterized by this incredible, intense technicality and some serious groove. But as the years have passed, I think they've become smarter in both their musical and thematic delivery. On here, we've got classic songs that are about vengeance, population control through mutilation, killing zombies, and of course, good old-fashioned serial killers. Paul Mazurkowitz, who's the drummer, decided to name the album Chaos Horrific. And I think Chaos Horrific really creates a great balance between the sort of frenzied psychopathy of Cannibal Corpse, but then the incredibly malevolent, evil atmosphere that is particularly on this record. So the chaos and the horrific. So the chaos element, as you can imagine, is the more frenzied, the more kind of like totally almost rabid element to their sound. And in many ways, I kind of personally likened this album to Evisceration Plague quite a bit. The record opens with Overlords of Violence, and it's basically 3000 BPM from then on. It very rarely kind of lets up unless it's actually kind of doing that on, you know, its own terms, essentially. I think there's also very much a kind of like old school idea to this record. There were moments that really kind of threw back to that thrash metal aesthetic and made me think a little bit of Eaten Back to Life. Chaos Horrific, the title track, also deals some serious damage, and then as you can imagine, you know, frenzied feeding does exactly what it says on the tin. There's moments on here like Pestilential Rictus as well that I thought kind of embraced more of a punky kind of vibe, which was quite cool. For me, this album almost felt a little bit like, you know, a Rain in Blood kind of vibe. You know, it's really intense. And almost all of the songs that are on here have ridiculous technicality and some pretty tricky time signatures too. Vengeful Invasion is a great example of that, and then Fractured and Refractured is also kind of one of those songs, I think, where it's got quite tricky time signatures. And I would say maybe that's the only song on this record that I kind of found it a little bit hard to get my head around. But as I mentioned, you know, the second element of this album is the horrific element. There's a definite darkness to this record, and I think it's seen in multiple different things, particularly the fact that a lot of the songs are kind of more in the lower register where the riffs are concerned. There's kind of diminished scales. There's also really interesting, not lead sections, but almost like second guitar sections where there's a bit more melody, and it has that sort of slower, kind of almost like dripping aesthetic. Like Bloodblind, for example, that song is basically one hefty fucking bend, and it just sounds colossal. And then the final track, Drain You Empty, there's a moment in that which just sounds like it's just this evil trying to crush you, and I just love it. There's also definitely something to say about Rutan. You know, for those who may not be familiar, Eric Rutan has produced 6 Cannibal Corpse albums, and this is the second that he is part of the band. So he's very much, you know, ingrained in their entire kind of being as a band by now. And in truth, I think he's one of the best people that could be, you know, kind of not steering the ship, you know, because he's not kind of taking completely control, but, you know, bringing in kind of more experimental ideas and kind of, you know, shining certain things that maybe Hate Eternal might have done in the past. And it's, you know, clear to see that Rutan is a massive, massive asset to Cannibal Corpse and is doing nothing but making their sound better, in my opinion. One thing that the band really wanted to focus on in this record was dynamics, and I think, you know, Summoned for Sacrifice is a great example of that. You know, it's that classic kind of verse 1, verse 2, but verse 2 slightly different from verse 1. I also think that the riff, you know, in Summoned for Sacrifice kind of mimics that hacking and slashing that you hear in the lyrics.
The first one comes from the foot of the echo as the blood begins to spray. The second one...
Of course, though, it wouldn't be Cannibal Corpse without groove, and there's Vengeful Invasion, the bridge in Chaos Horrific, but I think Gold Star has to go to Pitchfork Impalement, which has probably the most kind of like groove-laden bit, where, you know, sometimes the band kind of like lock in with the palm muted guitars and the drums, and it just kind of like barrels forward, and I just love that. And production-wise, I think, you know, Chaos Horrific moves from that sort of abyssal dark that you hear, you know, on the lower register of the guitars, and it's kind of quite sort of murky, but then you're able to hear the clarity in all of the cymbals, you know, the different guitars which kind of come in, the little kind of leads here and there, and also, you know, the guitar solos really kind of like pierce through that as well. And where leads are concerned, you know, it's Dive Bomb Central and Overlords of Violence. Chaos Horrific has got this kind of diminished scale thing going on, and Summoned for Sacrifice has got more of a kind of melodic idea, but then you've got this big trade-off on Fracture and Refractured as well. And of course, you know, George, his vocals sound like a fucking locomotive coming straight towards you every single time, but there's nice clarity, you know, you can hear exactly what he's saying, you can understand the diction. Obviously, you might have to read the lyrics as well, but once you've read them, you're kind of like, oh yeah, I know exactly what he's actually saying. And that's what I think makes him such a great death metal performer, because he's just immovable, you know. And I think a lot of Cannibal Corpse kind of, the criticisms get lobbed at them quite unfairly, you know, in the fact that, oh, it's just another Cannibal Corpse album. Like, it's not really. Like, they are changing slowly but surely, but, you know, it's kind of, I think, those things where you really do notice it if you've been listening to them for a long time. Chaos Horrific is the perfect balance between the frenzied, insane psychopath and the malevolent, meticulous serial killer that lurks within Cannibal Corpse. Having the two, you know, playing off against each other allows for that sense of accessibility, but never really brings the tension or the intensity down to a boring level. And I would give this album somewhere more towards the 10s, but Fractured and Refractured, I think, just made me kind of bring it down a little notch. So it'll be a 9 out of 10 for this one. So I hope you guys enjoyed this album review. Let me know what you think in the comments underneath me. I always love to hear what you guys think, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. It'd be great if you could hit that like and subscribe button, and also hit that notification bell so that you know when I do upload. Other than that, I will see you guys very, very soon for another album review, more interviews, and all sorts of other stuff that I get up to. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.